All right, baseball fans. I'm here to talk about the just passed trading deadline of 2016, and it was a pretty active one to say the least. Well, on some fronts, but I'll get to that later. For the first part of this rant, I'm going to talk about the trading deadline in general, and then I will talk about how it affects the Red Sox in particular. But looking at some of the trades that were made, I'd have to say the most active team on the deadline was the Texas Rangers, who got Jonathan Lucroy at the last minute, along with Carlos Beltran from the Yankees. Now, some rumors had the Red Sox inquiring about him, but I didn't really see that happening with, the Yankees not wanting to trade within the division, especially to the Boston Red Sox. But, yeah, so the Rangers were pretty active. The Dodgers acquired Rich Hill and Josh Reddick from the Athletics. I know there was some speculation about who was going to get Rich Hill, a good rental pitcher, but he's on the DL at the moment, so kind of a risk for the Dodgers. Then you look at the Giants, who responded by getting Matt Moore, and the Cubs, prior to the deadline, got Chapman from the Yankees. So some moves going on before the deadline that were of significance, some closers and relievers changing teams. On the deadline, a lot more relievers got traded. The Blue Jays acquired some starting pitchers, such as Francisco Liriano and Scott Feldman. So there was a lot of movement on the trading deadline. The Red Sox acquired a reliever from the Twins. The Mets got Jay Bruce, which I thought was a great deal for them. They really needed some help offensively. Lately, they haven't been scoring a lot of runs. And Jay Bruce is a corner outfielder that has a lot of power and currently leads the National League in RBIs. So certainly helps their lineup going forward. And assuming the Mets pitching can hold up, that could be, just what they need. So the trading deadline, as I mentioned, it's all about needs. And, some teams needed bullpen help. Some teams needed starter rotation help. And a select number of teams needed offensive help. It would seem like the relief pitchers were the ones who got traded the most. I mean, even counting prior to the deadline, a lot of teams added bullpen help this year, more than I can remember in a while. Mark Melancon changed teams. Andrew Miller and Chapman both got traded from the Yankees as part of that dynamic bullpen. And Joe Smith from the Angels got traded. Fernando Abad from the Twins to the Red Sox. So a lot of different players. Brad Ziegler from the Diamondbacks to the Red Sox. A lot of different closers, setup guys, relief pitchers going to other teams to help their cause. And I suppose that's kind of the direction that Major League Baseball is going in. I mean, of course, starting pitching will still be a number one priority. It'll still be kind of tops on the list as far as, if you have an ace starting pitcher, you always have a chance to win. But if you don't have an ace starting pitcher, you can still, it appears, be a contender with a great bullpen. And the Indians right now seem to have both. They have a few really good starting pitchers, and now they have Andrew Miller at the back end of their bullpen. So I've talked about the trading deadline before, kind of how I don't like the whole buying and selling culture, how I feel like, teams at the top just kind of steal from the teams on the bottom and just kind of throw them some flimsy prospects in return. But this year, and that still happens sometimes, but I feel like this year there were a lot of trades made that kind of made sense in the grand scheme of things. Like, there were teams that made trades that I think should have made trades, and then, like, with the bullpens, I mean, the Cubs needed to shore up their bullpen, the Nationals shored up their bullpen, the Red Sox needed bullpen help. A lot of the teams that, made those trades did it for a really good reason. Now, the Indians were trying to get Jonathan Lucroy, which would have been a good fit, but he vetoed that trade, so the Rangers got him. And, I mean, I don't know what the Rangers bullpen looks like, honestly. I'm not like a Rangers expert, but I know that they're having a really good season this year. They have a good starting rotation and a pretty good lineup, so adding Lucroy and Beltran to that lineup can only help. So, again, I look at these trades and I say, you know what? Teams made really smart moves for the most part. The only one I kind of raise an eyebrow at is Matt Moore to the Giants. Did they need him? I don't know. I feel like they just kind of made that trade to respond to the Dodgers. In fact, I was watching MLB Network at the time when the trading deadline was getting closer and teams were making all these rapid-fire trades, and somebody asked, I forget who they asked, but they asked, what are the Giants going to do now that the Dodgers have acquired Rich Hill? And I'm like, well, why do the Giants have to do something? Again, it's whatever. The trading deadline has all these different rules and things, and, the most interesting trade prospect of the day was obviously Chris Sale of the Chicago White Sox. You didn't know if he was going to get traded or not and who was in on him, and there might have been more teams in on him than we know of, but obviously I wanted the Red Sox to be in on him. But at the same time, and this kind of is like how I've always felt about the whole being sellers at the deadline, like, I don't see the rush to trade your best player just because you're having a bad year. And I look at a lot of players. I'm one of those people that I like players to stay with the same team, even if it's not my team. Like, I want Carlos Gonzalez to stay with the Rockies. I even want Chris Archer to stay with the Rays. Like, I'm just one of those people. And one name that I always find interesting is Felix Hernandez, who the Red Sox, they didn't face him, but they faced the Mariners last night, so I started thinking about Felix Hernandez and how it seems like almost every offseason, every trading deadline, I hear about, oh, will the Mariners trade Felix Hernandez? Well, why? Oh, they're not that good. They got to trade him. Again, why? And I'm kind of glad that Seattle hasn't traded Felix Hernandez. Now, obviously, I'd like the Red Sox to get him, but otherwise, I kind of like that Felix Hernandez has been a Mariner for life to this point. And, I don't want to see them do some desperate trade at the last second just to do it. So, at the same time, as much as I wanted the Red Sox to get Chris Sale, I'm glad he's staying put with the White Sox. He was drafted by the White Sox. He's their ace pitcher. He's probably the best player they have right now. And, I don't know, to just trade him for a bunch of unknowns, like, if I'm a White Sox fan, I don't want to see that. Same with the Red Sox a couple of years ago. And I've talked about this before, but now that we're a bit further away from it, I can really talk about it. The Red Sox trading deadline in 2014, when they traded like 5 players off their Major League roster, including 3 starters, and, Jake Peavy, okay, he was a good pitcher, but he was, toward the end of his career, he's getting up there. They got a pretty decent return for him. And at the time, he wasn't really doing much for the team, so I can understand Jake Peavy, but John Lester and John Lackey were such big parts of the Red Sox over the past couple of years. John Lester in particular, being a career Red Sox player at that point. And they traded him, mainly because they probably couldn't get a deal done with him, but also because the team was lousy that year. In 2014, they were like 8 or 9 games out of the playoffs. Didn't look like they were going to do anything. So their solution was to trade everybody, and I mean everybody. They traded Andrew Miller, which I think is a mistake, because they could have had him as a closer now. They traded, just go down the list. God, it's ridiculous how many players they traded in 2014. And what did they get? For all the, team rebuilding experts and all the people who say you got to trade your players for prospects while you still can, all that crap, what did they get? They got Joe Kelly and Alan Craig for John Lackey. Joe Kelly is a fringe pitcher at best. He's had a couple good starts here and there. He's coming out of the bullpen now, throwing like 100 miles an hour, but he can't get anybody out. And then you got Alan Craig, who's just sitting in the minor leagues. Even if he was with the major league team, where would you put him? You already have first basemen, you've got infielders, you've got outfielders, and Alan Craig's not doing anything at the plate to justify bringing him up. So Alan Craig was a worthless pickup. The only one that kind of panned out is you got Yoenis Cespedes for Leicester, who you ended up trading for Rick Porcello. So in effect, you got Rick Porcello, who this year has been good, but is he really better than John Lester? I don't know. I would have been fine with keeping Lester and just never getting Porcello. But again, that's why the trade deadline to me is something that just kind of frustrates me, because if you have a bad season, all of a sudden you got to blow up the team. Say the Marlins had a bad season, they'd have to trade Jose Fernandez. Well, they wouldn't have to, but they probably would. But because they're having a good season, they're going to keep him. And you know what? That's good. I like that even the Marlins can have their own star players, like Fernandez and Giancarlo Stanton. I'm of the mind, I want teams to have good players. I know that sounds weird because, I want certain teams to win. I want the Red Sox to be good. I want the Mets to be good. I'm a big fan of the Red Sox, obviously, so I want them to be the best team. But that doesn't mean I want to see star players change teams every other year. Like, it's just kind of discouraging. I'm an overall baseball fan, so for these trading deadlines, just kind of cheapen it when it's like, well, you got to get rid of your best player. Will the Rockies trade Carlos Gonzalez? I'm glad they didn't. They already traded Troy Tulowitzki, who was like a lifetime Rocky, and I just didn't see the point. But again, that's the trading deadline. Now, as it goes down to the Red Sox, this is going to be kind of contradictory. I am a little disappointed they didn't make a trade. Not because I think they're great or anything, but I thought there were trades to be made, most notably Chris Sale. I think Chris Sale would have really kind of answered some of the questions about the starting rotation. And, I can't really get on Dave Dombrowski for not making deals, because he made about 5 deals in the month of July, leading up to the deadline when he got Fernando Abad, which I didn't think was a huge need, but whatever. He did make some deals. Now, the thing that frustrates me about the Red Sox, and always has, is their unwillingness to part with prospects. Any prospects. And I remember, I think Blake Swihart was one of the prospects talked about, in different trades, Cole Hamels and different pitchers available, and they wouldn't do it. Had to hold on to, Blake Swihart. He's going to be the next Buster Posey. He's going to be the next great hitting catcher. He's going to be this. He's going to be that. Blake Swihart isn't even in the major leagues right now. He's injured or whatever because they moved him to left field because they already have a catcher, as it turns out, or they did, Christian Vasquez, who's also in the minors right now. So, Blake Swihart, and he wasn't really that great of a hitter either, just to be honest with you. Maybe as a catcher, like I've heard that bantered about before, like if you bat 270 as a catcher, it's better than batting 270 as like a left fielder. And I kind of agree with that. I think if he was a catcher, if he, caught the pitching staff 5 days a week and then also hit 270 with like 15 home runs, maybe that's more valuable than him doing that as a left fielder. But again, is that really that great anyway? Like, I'm not going to trade for a great pitcher because I got a guy that can hit 270s with 15 home runs. I never got into the whole prospects thing. And the other thing is, this is a weird example that almost never comes up, but Hanley Ramirez. They traded Hanley Ramirez in 2006 for Josh Beckett. Now, Josh Beckett was a good pitcher at the time, but he wasn't like an ace. He wasn't like a Chris Sale at that point, but he was a really good pitcher. And the Red Sox were willing to part with Hanley Ramirez, who became a pretty good player in his own right. Now, I bring that up because, Josh Beckett, well, he's not even playing anymore, but he did have a couple really good years with the Red Sox, including winning the World Series with them in 2007. So I'd say it was a worthwhile pickup. But furthermore, the Red Sox ended up getting Hanley Ramirez back, albeit a lot later in his career. But I make that point to say, you could trade your prospects if they're really in demand, if you can get a really good player for them. I'm not saying just to get rid of them for anybody, which is why the Drew Pomeranz deal kind of confused me. But if you get rid of your prospects, say you trade Andrew Benintendi, say you get Chris Sale, you trade your big prospects to get Chris Sale or some other really good player, and 3-4 years up the road, Benintendi's hitting, 350, he's like this really good player. Well, who's to say you can't get him up the road? Today's prospects will be tomorrow's, David Price. They'll be the player that's sought after. But if you're the Red Sox, you can get those players. You can either trade for them or sign them or, a lot of things can happen. So it's very short-sighted to think, if we get rid of this prospect, we lose him forever. Well, one of two things are going to happen, and one of a few things. He's either going to stay with your team and be great, he's going to stay with your team and be lousy, or you're going to trade him to another team where he'll be great or lousy. And if he's lousy with the other team, who cares? And if he's great with the other team, maybe you can pick him back up. I don't know. I don't know what this desperation is to hold on to every single prospect we have so that in 5 years we can have this great team that rarely seems to happen anyway. Like, if I go by all these prospects back in like 2008, 2009, we should have the best team in the world now because all these prospects have matured. Okay, Betts, Bogarts, and Bradley, okay, they have matured. Great. But I really wouldn't have minded if they traded any of them before they became who they are, and we got some great player in return, and then in 2019, Bogarts is a free agent, let's go sign him. Like, I don't know what the big rush is or what the big deal is to hold on to these prospects. So, leading up to the trade deadline, I wanted Dave Dombrowski to make some big blockbuster deal, and Dave Dombrowski even said, that he's in the market for a starting pitcher, but not just like, any ordinary starting pitcher. But then he signs Drew Pomeranz, who is just kind of any ordinary starting pitcher. I mean, he's having a good year, but they traded their number one pitching prospect to get him. And again, I know I'm not all huge into holding on to the prospects, but if you're going to trade your number one pitching prospect, you should say your sight's a little higher than Drew Pomeranz. I just feel like Espinoza could have been better dealt for Chris Sale. I mean, definitely, hold on to those kind of prospects for the better players. But, whatever. They traded Espinoza for Pomeranz, and, to this point, he's not that impressive. He's just like every other pitcher they brought in. He goes 6 or 7 innings occasionally, gives you 3 or 4 runs, gives up 3 or 4 runs, and then that's it. He's got like a 5 ERA. He's like a 3rd or 4th starter, and you gave up your number one pitching prospect to get Drew Pomeranz, who's okay. I mean, really, the best deal the Red Sox made in this trading deadline season is Brad Ziegler. Brad Ziegler is a 37-year-old, closer, setup guy, probably only going to be with the team for a year or two, if that, and he's a really good pickup. He's been pretty unhittable, other than one game that Hanley Ramirez threw the ball away. So, Brad Ziegler was a really good pickup, really smart pickup, add another guy with closing experience to the bullpen, which is why I thought Fernando Abad was kind of unnecessary. I mean, I guess you can never have too many bullpen arms, but I feel like they're kind of good on that, at least for now, and I just don't know how important it was to make that deal, but whatever they did. They added Aaron Hill, Michael Martinez, who are essentially utility guys, guys that come off the bench, give you different things. Not unvaluable at all, but also not exactly game-changing. Who's the other guy they added? I think that's it. They added 2 relievers, 2 utility guys, and then Pomeranz, who they added shortly after the All-Star game. And again, that just doesn't do much for me, to be honest. And I'd almost rather they didn't make a lot of those trades, because other than Ziegler, I just don't see any of them panning out long-term. Drew Pomeranz just seems like another guy that they've been plugging in all year, trying to see if they can find somebody besides Stephen Wright and Rick Porcello and occasionally David Price. They've been trying to find this extra starter to give them depth. But, depth to me is just kind of a lousy way of saying, well, we need someone who's decent. Depth is not, getting a top-of-the-rotation guy. Depth is not getting an impact player. Depth is getting a guy who can suck less than the guys you have. That's pretty much all they were trying to do. Get somebody who's better than Buchholz. Well, guess what? Anyone's better than Buchholz. So, yeah, he fills that need. He's a good fourth starter, I guess. But, I don't know. A little disappointed. Actually, very disappointed with the Red Sox trading deadline. How it just kind of came and went. And they refused to trade Yoan Moncada and Benintendi because they're going to be the best players of all time. And, Chris Sale's not worth it, I guess. Whatever. So we'll see what happens with the rest of the season. Just wanted to talk about the trading deadline a little bit, get your thoughts and opinions. What did you think of the 2016 trading deadline? Did your team do enough, or would you have liked to see more?